Good afternoon, everyone. There's one very depressing thing that somebody can do when they're starting a speech to such a distinguished audience as this, and it's to say, I'm going to show you a 6-minute video. I went up to Glasgow not long ago to give actually a very similar speech to the one I'm going to give today to a group of entrepreneurs in Glasgow. And I arrived the evening before and I showed the AV editor who was going to be doing the AV work the fact that I had a disc I was going to play and it was 6 minutes long, and I was also going to be talking over it. And this Glaswegian actually says, "Oh no." Anyway, I left the video with him, and the next morning I arrived at 9 o'clock to do the speech, and he came up to me and said, "You know that video you gave me?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I watched it 12 times last night, it was fantastic." So hopefully I'll get a similar reaction today. What we're going to show you is the flight of our prototype for the Virgin Galactic business. And before I show it, I'll just say a few words about what we're doing. It became very evident to Virgin in the late 1990s that technology was changing extremely fast, and there were areas which were very relevant to our business. We also had a long-term view that the energy price was going to rise and that environmental issues were going to become very important to all of us. And we began to look at a project to build an aircraft that was unique, an aircraft that could be capable of flying around the world on one tank of fuel. We saw it as a sponsorship and brand promotion project. It was called the Virgin Atlantic Global Flyer, and last year you may have seen in the news that a man called Steve Fossett flew it around the world non-stop on a tank of fuel. It was an aircraft made of carbon composite with one of the world's most advanced Williams jet engines in it. And he managed to get around the world on less fuel per hour at 50,000 feet than a four-wheel drive Range Rover uses per hour. It was a quite remarkable achievement. In the process of designing that groundbreaking technology aircraft, we met a man called Bert Rutan who worked on it for us. And he was secretly designing a spaceship to win a prize called the X Prize. And he was designing it for a man called Paul Allen, the former colleague of Bill Gates at Microsoft. But he knew he couldn't develop it commercially with Paul, because Paul was interested in winning the prize and proving the technology. And Paul agreed to sell us the technology to develop this into a commercial business for the future. And the reason we thought that was important is not just to carry people into space who want to go, who can afford to go, some of the celebrity customers we've already signed up. We believed it was important because space has done nothing for 40 years. Governments have controlled space. They've used military technology, old military technology, to take very successful scientific instruments into space, which tell us about our environment, tell us about the world we live in, run our GPS systems, run the logistics and communications for many of the companies you all are involved with. But the technology of getting there is old-fashioned, dirty, and environmentally wasteful, and they've done nothing about it for 40 years. So we decided to take this project forward as a space tourism project, but also as the foundation of an entirely new space industry in the future. And we have to start somewhere. So if we run the film now, I'm going to do my talking over it a bit. This is the flight of Spaceship One on the 4th of October last year. And this project was undertaken, this first part of the project was undertaken for $27 million. Less money than NASA spent designing a pen that wrote upside down in space. The Russians had a press conference the next day and showed a pencil and said it does the same thing. This is also less than 4 hours of NASA's entire annual budget. The next phase will be more expensive, but let's concentrate on what we're doing here. This is a small space plane underneath a carrier plane, and it's about to get launched at 50,000 feet. It's launched and it fires a hybrid rocket motor, much safer than anything developed before, which uses laughing gas and rubber to get it into space. It's now leaving the Earth's atmosphere. He's gone from 0 to the speed of sound in 6 seconds. And within 55 seconds, he will have switched off the motor and he will be in space. The remarkable thing about this technology is he's using light carbon composite materials. There is no metal in the hull of that spaceship. It's built of CO2 locking up carbon composite. A very cheap, lightweight material, which is also very, very heat resistant, which will be important in the second phase of this, which is re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. The pilot, Brian Binney, is originally from Scotland and became a US Air Force test pilot and was extremely brave undertaking these flights. But what he proved was it was possible for $27 million to do what had been eluding the world's major governments for the previous 5 years. which is safely get people into and out of space twice in the space of 2 weeks, thus winning a $10 million prize, which has changed the face of space technology. This is Burt Rutan, the designer. This is our mission control. As you can see, highly sophisticated and just like NASA's. And he is now just at the phase of entering space itself. Those are pieces of glass. That shows you the heat of the rocket motors when in space. Now, really importantly, he's about to do something which is the unique feature of this project above all others. He changes the shape of the spaceship in space using what we call the feathering device, which will turn this into a shuttlecock or sycamore leaf to re-enter the Earth's atmosphere in a carefree way, much safer than trying to fly into the atmosphere in a powered flight. This is the feathering device now being activated. He's at about over 120 kilometers above the Earth's atmosphere at the moment. And by doing what he's doing now, he can not only enjoy 5 minutes of weightlessness up there, but he knows that his re-entry will be safe. Safer than anything that's been achieved by manned space flight before. And the view's not bad either. Now, during this 5 minutes, Brian will demonstrate to us that he genuinely is in space, because the first time I showed this video, it wasn't the Glasgow occasion, but the one before that, when I very first showed it, people believed this was some sort of hoax Capricorn 1 type film, that we hadn't really done this at all, but it genuinely did happen. We happen to be getting a little bit of interference at the moment. I think that is clearly ET trying to go home at the same time as we're showing this video. The fascinating thing about the project is that it could unlock so much. And it could unlock the key to using space much more for the benefit of mankind than we've been able to do so far. To put a satellite into space at the moment costs a minimum of $30 to $50 million. With this technology, we believe we can in the long term get that cost down below $2 to $4 million, depending on the size of the satellite. And our brave space tourists who have signed up with us, we've already got $14 million in deposits at this phase. These people are the pioneers of a new industry. They're like the people who were prepared to pay in the 1920s to fly on barnstorming aircraft as the aircraft industry is being developed in the private sector. And they know what they want. They want to experience weightlessness. They want to see the curvature of the Earth. They want to see the beauty of our solar system. But more than all, they feel, from Victoria Principal to Brian Singer, the film director, to Dr. Alan Walton, the biosciences entrepreneur, those sort of customers all feel that they're part of a dream. Some of them have been involved in composite technology. By the way, we're now re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. We've come down to 55,000 feet. And the cleverest bit of all is he reforms the feathered device back into spaceship, and it's also a glider. So he will now conduct a glide back down to the airport completely safely. None of your parachutes dropping in the sea, trying to land on a frozen plane in the steppes in Russia. This is landing like a completely normal aircraft. And for our passengers, that experience is all important. They can safely, for the first time, leave the planet and come back again. But if we can make this technology work in a broader base, we can do things in space which will help to save this planet over the next 50 to 100 years. Because space is one of the keys to climate change, and understanding it better and fighting it. And also new technology is the key to that. It is possible to unlock new technologies at relatively low cost. If you can bring together a genius like Burt Rutan and the finance of private equity, you can do things which have eluded governments for some time to come.
Keep her coming down, looking good.
And I think one of the important things about this project, as the spaceship finally lands, is exactly that. Virgin sees, in our minds, three things happening over the next 30 years. One, we believe that energy prices are going to continue to rise. Despite the fact there is no shortage of oil in the world, the politics of oil and the politics of managing oil resources and the taxation of governments at all levels are going to make energy costs more expensive for all of us. Number one. Number two, if you believe that climate change could be linked to the production of CO2, that means that we have to find ways and solutions in both aviation, ground transportation, and in space to make products more environmentally efficient. And we as capitalists have to do that. It's what I call Gaia capitalism. It's taking the bull by the horns and facing the fact we do have an issue to deal with, all of us as companies, and work out how we're going to deal with it and how we're going to be able to take R&D and sponsorship and marketing and bring them all together. And for Virgin Galactic is part of that process. It's a flagship project for us. It's going to be taking high net worth individuals into space to start with, but we believe it's the foundation of a new approach to that industry. We believe the same thing is going to happen in aviation. The brave companies, and I count companies like BA, ourselves, and some of the more forward-thinking airlines around the world amongst them, have got to force the manufacturers to be more efficient. Therefore, we built a plane that could fly around the world made of carbon composite at high altitude on one tank of fuel, just to prove to Boeing and Airbus it can be done. The same is going to be true in ground transportation. If you're building cars in the future, we've got to think about the whole energy input of that car. How much does the steel cost in CO2 output to produce? Could we build a car of carbon composite and in the long term be more economically efficient by doing so? Let's build trains with regenerative braking, just as the new Pendolinos on the West Coast Main Line are. They become the most efficient electric trains in Europe because they put the electricity back into the overhead catenary above them when we brake them. No other trains are doing that at the moment. We've got to continue with this kind of investment. And for all of us in this room, this means we've got to think about our marketing strategies. We've got to think about the way we do business. Let's take Vodafone as an example. A fine company. We do happen to be a rival of Vodafone, so I'm not going to be too rude about them, but if you look at Vodafone, over the past 5 years, they've spent on sponsorship projects about $200 million on things like Manchester United sponsorship and Formula One sponsorship. I would predict that if the world is going to go the way I think it's going to go, the Vodafone of 10 to 15 years' time will be spending that kind of money on projects which attract the public's interest and attention, but help to solve some of the problems that we face in this world. Maybe there'll be the Vodafone competition for the everlasting battery. That would be a fine thing. Maybe there'll be a Vodafone competition for a photovoltaic mobile phone, which can also be a voice over internet protocol phone in the future. The same needs to be true of all of our businesses. We need to change the way we think, because what is happening at the moment to the environment around us is frightening. And there are countries that are going to be responsible for that or not responsible for that. There are countries that are going to think on their feet and not think on their feet. There's going to be private individuals who think on their feet or don't, and there's going to be companies who do the same. British companies have got to be on the forefront of thinking on their feet. The Chinese at the moment are building enough coal-fired power stations to produce the same amount of CO2 over the next 40 years as man's entire industrialism for the past 200 years has done. And that is dangerous. But at the same time, in the last week, the Chinese have done a deal with the Australian government to buy $40 billion worth of uranium. So they're clearly thinking of changing their plans on that. Last week, they banned chopsticks made of wood, unreusable chopsticks, throwaway chopsticks in China. They produce 45 billion chopsticks a year, made of wood resources they can barely afford now, given what's happening to their own environment. So in a fell swoop, the government banned them. They're now going to be making all chopsticks in China reusable. The Taiwanese last week banned plastic bags. These are the kind of measures that are going to have to be taken by government. But we as businesses are going to have to do our sponsorship and our marketing and our thinking with a new type of R&D to find every way to reduce our energy inputs and outputs from the businesses we do and still remain strong, competitive, capitalist companies. Thank you very much for your time. I believe we're going to do some Q&A as well. Thank you.